Hello, your name is Page Turner. Well, not your name, the character you're playing in Paperback Adventures. Unless your name really is Page Turner, in which case, I'm sorry, your parents must be awful. Page Turner writes novels, bad ones, Bob Schlock, and your job being them is not to write just one, but a whole trilogy, because that's how books get written now. But wait, there's a new kid on the block, and their name is Writers. Get it? Block, writers. Talking of, how do you write something? That's right, with blocks. Letters, the building blocks of words. Harmony. Anywho, that's the premise of Paperback Adventures. You choose a character, currently available are Damsel, Ex Machina, and Plot Hook, and I should note, Damsel isn't really a damsel in distress, she's an assassin. All three character names are plot devices, you see? And then as you play a game through them, you are writing their trilogy. That trilogy is a sequence of 6 enemies, each increasing in difficulty and intricacy. So unless there's some character development in your novel, aka cool upgrades, you won't get to the finish line. It's also a gauntlet because your health does not reset between encounters. You have to be very careful, no plot armor for you, because if you run out of health, you lose. If you're thinking Slay the Spire with Scrabble, yes, but hold on to that thinking. Paperback Adventures is a deck building game, a genre of games where you build your deck as you play, starting with some rubbish cards and getting better and better ones. Recently, this genre exploded with popularity thanks to video games like Slay the Spire or Marvel's Midnight Suns, and I think Paperback Adventures might just be my favorite one. So, each turn you will draw 4 cards and then you will form a word with them. Your cards have things like attack symbols, defense symbols, energy symbols, and a cool ability. For each attack symbol that you produce, you will reduce your foe's health by 1, reduce it to 0, and you will flip it to stage 2, where you reset its health and it gets a bunch of new abilities, then do all of that again, and you've defeated it. Phew. One step closer to hitting that word count. You also always have a wild card that can be any letter of your choice, except you get a little bonus if you don't use it. And also, each enemy has a vowel it is weak to, so you can use that as well. Unless you've got a cool power-up, and we'll get to those later, you can, at most, form a 6-letter word. But it isn't the length, it's the quality. You can't say that sincerely without sounding naff. I feel like that phrase has been robbed from humans. Let's say I've drawn an R, a G, an N, and also an O. Nothing springs to mind immediately, so I look over to the enemy vowel, it's an I. What possibly could I form with those? It's groin, isn't it? I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. Okay, I am doing this on purpose, but when I played Paperback Adventures, I did genuinely end up making groin, not only because, let's face it, words are funny, but also because tactically it was the best option. Yes, there's tactics in them that word game, more tactics than you would think. Like, think of the number of tactics that this game would have, and then get ready to have that number exceeded. Each time you form a word, you have to splay the cards, right or left, each choice forming a different array of visible symbols on the cards. If I splay my cards right, I will have more attack symbols visible, and if I splay my cards left and ad lib as I fumble with my fingers, I will have more defense ones. I wrote that line into the script knowing I would indeed fumble. Now that's what I call foreshadowing. Crucially, the choice of how I display my cards doesn't just affect whether I'll be more bullish or beefy, it also determines whether the first or the last letter of the word lies on top. And this is really the key bit. It gives you a special ability. Let us pedal back and think a little bit about what's happening here. Like I mentioned, each turn you draw 4 cards. That means each turn you have at least 4 quality decisions, 4 abilities that you could choose from. But it's not like, oh, I want to use the ability on R because it will give my opponent 2 hexes. I have to form a word with these letters and then have the R be at the start or the end of the word, because it is only the ability on the top card that will trigger. And then let's say I do figure out a word that would work, like wrong, which might confuse you because wrong doesn't start with an R but a W. Well, remember, I have a wild letter, and the wild letter will default the ability to the card underneath it. But maybe this round the enemy is launching a big attack against me, and I don't want to be more attacky, I want to be more defensive-y, which makes wrong the wrong word because it's played wrong, and now I need to figure out another word with these letters that ends in an R, or I'll get hit so hard I'll be a goner. We're attacking, we're defending, we're hexing the enemy and gathering energy and boons, and I haven't even mentioned those yet. Why, you might ask? For the Moolah! We need to write a trilogy or we can't get the biscuit. A biscuit being our ability to pay for rent and food. Each game of Paperback Adventures is segmented into 6 parts, each part being an enemy that you face. This enemy could be a lackey or a boss. You'll notice I've been having some fun with letters in this video, and that's absolutely a big part of this game's charm. But indulge me just one more time as I tell you about an actual thing that happened in one of my games that showcases how enemies work. A brief interruption from editor Efka. Late in the production process of this video, we noticed that we actually made a rules error that will affect the next scene going forward. I'm gonna explain what the rule is, but I'm also gonna let you know that I'm keeping the scene as it is because I think it still describes how the game plays pretty well. And as long as you're aware what to look out for, you should be fine. So, the rules mistake. If I make a word, I assumed that when you play this game, that whatever card is on top, you get both sets of its symbols. Actually, what you do get is only the symbol based on how you splayed it. So, for example, if I made a mistake, I would get to keep all of the energy, but not a defense. If I'm going on the attack, that's how that works. So be aware of that. I will say that it does affect some of my comments that I made about the game's difficulty. I think the game is harder than I imagined it was, just a tiny smidge. But it does not affect the quality of the rulebook, on which I will also comment later on the video, because actually this rulebook explains that part of the game pretty well. So with that, is the rest of the video, and no more mistakes, I hope. In this game I was playing Damsel, a character that's all about big attack bursts and damn the consequences. My enemy? Naturally, I got dealt the pesky suitor. I'ma make you mine tonight, pulling your hair, baby. Ick. Anywho, I draw a T, an I, an H, and also an N. Those are not hard letters to form a word with, especially when I've got an extra enemy vowel and a wild letter. Thin, think, ink, nick, and so on. But none of those words are right. After we form our word, we'll collect all of our attack symbols, deal the enemy damage, and then the enemy will take their turn. What they do depends entirely on who they are. Each enemy has a suite of actions, each round executing one of them and then moving on to the next one. This way you'll see exactly what the enemy will do. Maybe they'll shield up, or maybe they'll punish you with hexes for each attack that you let through. The pesky suitor only has one action. Awkward flirtations that it repeats over and over and over and over again. Thematic. Back to our letters and the correct word, which is hint. As in, this guy needs to take a hint. Again, thematic, but also strategic. The pesky suitor has exactly 5 health in his first stage. Also, each turn he will deal 5 damage and heal 5 health. Meaning that if I do anything less than 5 damage, he simply heals back up to full and then keeps asking for my phone number so he can send me interesting articles. And here's the thing, the only way I generate 5 attack symbols out of these cards is if H is on the top. Alternatively, I could go for Knit. N is the top card, its ability will trigger and it'll generate me an extra free attack. But it makes less energy symbols than hint, and also it's a little more glamorous to tell him to F off rather than awkwardly mumble that he doesn't want to date you because your hair is infested with parasitic insect eggs. There's another reason I wouldn't want to spend the N for its ability, and notice I said spend, as in literally spend my letter. I'm a writer after all, I can barely afford letters as it is. Which reminds me, this video is getting really long and expensive. Time to honors. Yes, the letter you put on top will generally produce a powerful effect that more often than not will serve as a right out of jail free card. But once you use that ability, it gets fatigued and can no longer be used against that enemy, leaving the circulation of your deck. And this isn't like an option. Every top card of every word leaves your deck until you defeat that enemy. With each word you type, you worry not just about the composition and the effect, but also your future well-being, lest you be left with only vowels and then all you can write is ah. Here's a question: what's the secret to comedy? That's right, a series of 6 encounters, each increasing in complexity and challenge. What separates Paperback Adventures from Slay the Spire and many derivatives is pacing. The entire game is split into 3 parts, or 3 books if you will. Each book has 2 enemies, first a lackey, then a boss. Bosses are a little bit more intricate than lackeys, but otherwise all the rules are the same, which doesn't tell you a lot. So let me instead impose my own description for how this game progresses. Book 1 lackey, that's warm up. Book 1 boss, I guess this is actually challenging. Book 2 lackey, I'm beginning to see the game now. Book 2 boss, can you actually cut that out? Book 3 lackey, okay, this is just stupid now. And finally, the book 3 boss, ha 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 ha, this is literally impossible. This progression feels natural, each step ratcheting up the puzzle precisely high enough for you to wonder, how will I ever deal with this one? For example, the book 2 boss Cthulhu keeps gaining boons with almost all of its actions. If it ever has 7, you just lose the game immediately. It also has no enemy vowel, haha, because it's Cthulhu, get it? Key thing being that the enemy vowel ability lets you skip the next enemy action, meaning that unless you bodge some way out of McGoverns Items to remove boons from the enemy yourself, it's a short trek to Lose Town. And as an insult to injury, the Cthulhu does have one action that removes boons from it, but it also deals you 15 damage. Good luck. Thus, Paperback Adventures never feels dull. Its encounters never feel hackneyed or trivial. It's not just content that the developers throw at you in a random pattern hoping something sticks. It's encounters that keep challenging you to write yourself out of progressively more preposterous paper bags. One of them literally being a paper bag. This is further reinforced by your health and rewards. Let's talk about health first, because rewards are like a whole thing of their own. Whether boss or lackey, you defeat them by reducing their health to 0. Here's the thing, when you defeat an enemy, most of your things like energy and hexes reset to 0, but not your health, meaning this isn't a sprint, it's 6 sprints, which is technically, I think, a marathon. This puts you in a constant state of alertness, each health point a precious morsel slipping away from your slimy golem hands. Each turn is a desperate attempt to engineer some sort of nonsense word just bashing your head against the Scrabble dictionary. What do you mean, jolf isn't a word? I was just jolfing with my buddies on Tuesday. Let's try flodge. When you defeat a boss, or twice per entire game, you will get to heal up. But how much you heal also determines the quality of your rewards. Play too fast and loose, and you won't get to equip the really sweet upgrades that are essential to persevere the catastrophe that is book 3 enemies. There's one more cool thing I want to show you before we get down to business. Hexes and Boons. Hexes and Boons are two of the game's 4 resources, the other two being health, which is self-explanatory, and energy, which is something you spend to activate your items and core abilities. In some ways, Hexes and Boons are incredibly simple. Both you and your enemies can have both. If you have a Hex, that's bad for you. If your enemy has a Hex, that's good for you. The inverse is true of Boons. You have Boon good, enemy have Boon bad. But mechanically, what do they mean? Well, everything, sort of. A Hex is any number of bad things that you can do to your enemy, but what gives it tangibility is the items, MacGuffins, and core abilities that you activate those Hexes with. For example, if you play Ex Machina, you'll start with Laser Eyes as a core card, meaning you look up how many Hexes the enemy has, spend them, and then deal damage according to this table. The more Hexes you spend, the more laser you'll laser. So in that sense, a Hex becomes a target lock for the old evil eye. Whereas Damsel has a poison vial, which drips damage consecutively over turns if you accumulate enough of it. Boons function exactly the same with a few exceptions. They're much harder to get, they carry over between enemies, and you can also spend them to buy new items, new letters for your deck, MacGuffins, anything you like. I'm genuinely amazed how I describe one mechanism in Paperback Adventures, mention another one, and then I'm like, I have to tell you about this one as well. MacGuffins and items are some of the things you can buy in the shop. Items you can activate with energy as you're forming a word, whereas MacGuffins are constant effects that change up the rules to the game. For example, a musket will generate an attack symbol for every letter in your word at the cost of a very expensive 4 energy, whereas a prized hat will grant you 2 energy anytime you make a word that's at least 6 letters long. You'll notice how these two things combine really well. A musket rewards me for having longer words, whereas the prized hat partly covers the energy cost if I manage to architecturalize the protractulated confabulation. Apologies, I ate a thesaurus for breakfast. Paperback Adventures is riddled with these MacGuffins and items leading into one strategy or another, letting you combine them in peculiar ways, each run offering a new approach. There's this sense of crafting an intangible pathway. You don't yet know how this story will end, but you do hope that you'll end up writing something fabulous. And by writing something fabulous, I do mean you'll get a letter ability that lets you draw extra cards, that powers the musket and then triggers the hat. Gosh, I don't want this story to end because I know what's coming, so I saved the best for last. Did I mention that this is a solo game? And I don't mean like it has a solo mode or whatever. The primary player count for Paperback Adventures is 1. I've not always been on board with solo board gaming. Some games I feel are just meant to be played with other people. But games that have been primarily designed to be played as one, that I can appreciate. We're planning to cover a lot more of these going forward, including on this channel and also on our podcast, Talk Cardboard. In the last episode, for example, we discussed another excellent solo-only game, Resist. Sorry, that's Resist! There's an exclamation mark at the end. You can tell that Paperback Adventures was tailor-made for Oon because there are in fact 2 separate 2-player modes, and both of them are weird, clunky, and make me think that if I have to play this with someone else, I'd rather just play with the solo rules, sharing the decisions with the other person. In fact, it's kind of perfect for that too. One person can be in charge of all of the crunch, figuring out what items to use, which letter should be on top, and then you can say to the other person, think of a word that uses all of these letters and ends in F or whatever. The Scrabble part. A couple of years ago, I made a video arguing that deck builders are basically the hero's journey, but in board game form. Now, I'm not saying I was right, but meanwhile, Firaxis made a video game where you literally play Marvel heroes. So, I don't know, I feel like I was onto something there. In fact, there's 2 hero's journeys. The character your character is writing is on a hero's journey, but also the character you're playing, Paige Turner, is on a hero's journey too. Words are free, they say, so anyone who chooses to do the scribbly-dibbly for a living literally has the worst paid job in the world, and therefore automatically qualifies to be a hero. Oh, you disagree? Well, here's a link to my Patreon. Clicking for some reason. Go on, prove me wrong. I also argued that deck builders are weird to play with other people because nobody cares about your combo made out of cards upon cards upon cards where your Sonic Orb taps your Death Glaive to expurge your Smitten Mittens for 2 damage every time you end your sneeze phase. Please just wake me up when your turn is done. Paperback Adventures gives you the space to indulge yourself at your table, to agonizingly gnaw through available options. It doesn't matter how long it takes to scrabble it out, it's just you engaging in a perfect marriage of mechanisms, form, and theme. Because hey, guess what? The act of writing is also almost always a solo gig. And consider another thing. That word analysis paralysis, that's just writer's block. Letters being fatigued each turn, that's you editing text so you don't write the same text, because when text repeats, your text begins to sound like awkward, poorly written text. I love Paperback Adventures. It's my favorite solo game. It's my favorite deck builder. It's one of the best games we have ever reviewed. As a game, I love it. I recommend it. I hug it. I raise it in the air like a lion cub to bestow it on the populace. But as a product, the first 2 things you see when you open Paperback Adventures is this rulebook and this plastic tray. And I hate both of them. Let's start with the rulebook, because you know what I'm going to say, it's bad. It's the sort of bad I was expecting, because publisher Fowers Games writes rulebooks that can be at best described as woolly and more accurately described as the floor of an 8-year-old's room. Page 5 has been smeared with chocolate spread, the section on enemy actions is spinning on the ceiling fan, half the rules were eaten by the dog, and the FAQ hasn't been washed in a week. And I know I complain about this a lot, but in a game that lives in the margins, where every health point matters, where every interaction feels like it has the precise rules living somewhere, probably in the designer's brain, this just isn't good enough. But don't worry, if the rules frustration isn't causing you enough agony, then these metal stat trackers that are meant to slot into these plastic trays will at least give you finger hernia. And before all you doctor type people watching tell me there's no such thing as finger hernia, try wedging in one of these steel chevrons and talk to me again. I'm not done. Sleeves. Environmental concerns aside, I like that this game comes with sleeves. You shuffle a lot of cards. Sleeves make shuffling easy, so that's nice. Also, the sleeves have artwork that matches the game and protects your cards from scuffing. All good. But the sleeves aren't in the game just for kicks, they are mandatory. Every letter card in the game can be upgraded. When you upgrade the card, you flip it over, now it has a better ability, more symbols, etc. Obviously then, you need opaque sleeves, because otherwise you would see what letter is coming up. Sleeves are essential to playing. They make the game function. Can you guess how many sleeves come with the game? That's right, exactly as many as there are cards. So then what happens when one of these sleeves, as they are so often known to do, split? I can't believe they didn't put in any extra. Just, 5 extra sleeves. Imagine opening this game, sleeving your cards and accidentally splitting one before you even played one game. Then you have to go buy extra sleeves to sleeve all of the cards because you can't reuse the old ones because remember, art unique. Still not done. So this is Paperback Adventures, right? Now, looking at this cover, you'd assume that if you bought Paperback Adventures, you'd be able to play Paperback Adventures. No. Paperback Adventures is the core box, but is not by itself playable. Launching together with the core box are 3 character packs. Combine 1 character pack with the core box and that's your playable game. This I don't mind so much. I get the point of it. This is the VCR, these are the VHS. You put one in, Robocop is playing, good times. I just wish they labeled it better so that someone picking this up at a store and not paying attention to the tiny text on the back doesn't feel like they were swizzed. On the upside, each character pack comes with extra lackeys, bosses, McGoverns items, what have you. It makes the whole experience richer. But the characters themselves feel pretty similar. Damsel and Ex Machina don't really offer a drastically different playing experience. One is attack and persevere, the other is defend and persevere. It's only when we reach Plot Hook, a character that's leaning more towards push your luck and jackpotting from longer words, that we get a sense of something a bit more adventurous. Still not done! Why is this game called Paperback Adventures? Some of you might recognize the name Paperback from the past, a game published by the same publisher, which was a deck builder with words, and then the spiritual sequel Hardback, also a deck builder with words. And you know what? They were fine, but ultimately I didn't find them that intriguing. If you like them, great, but I know I'm far from alone in this opinion, and anyone who shares it with me is gonna take one look at Paperback Adventures and go, huh, I guess I don't need more of that game. You do! This game deserves to be seen and tried by everyone, unless you really hate words, but come on. If you hate words, then keep stum. Finally, and once again a weird move by the publisher, the video game for Paperback Adventures was released just a few short months after this came out, which normally would be great, but A, I think this game is better on paper, and B, I think this game is better on paper. The video game version is at least significantly cheaper, which means a lot of people are gonna try it and be like, I guess this is nice. And it is, but it's not great because the structure, pacing, and crunch is a big improvement in the cardboard variant. The rulebook says that this game is very hard, but actually I think it's just a touch too easy for video game mode. Like, when I play this, I feel the crunch, I feel the burn, but I am yet to lose a game, and I didn't even start with the training mode, and each game I've upped the difficulty with modifiers, which actually are a really nice touch. At the table, this feels just right. I plug in, I get the challenge, I spend the next 1 or 2 hours in my own word world. I like it. On PC, this feels trivial, more so because the PC variant by default lets you pick any card to trigger the ability rather than the top card of the word, which makes it even easier and also further muddies the rules. Also, there are other rules changes, enemies have different names, etc. It's like Uncanny Valley. I don't know if this last one is a me problem. I've played a lot of Slay the Spire, and I know a thing or two about deck builders, and I know at least 20 words, but all of this together makes for a hodgepodge product, which is weird because the design part is so purposeful and so precise. I don't want people to experience like a bad production and then bounce off because of this or that. I want them to see what I see, the best deck building and the best solo game that I have ever played. Okay, you got me. I don't care. Well, I do care about the chevron smashing my fingers and a little bit about the rulebook, but the rest I can just live with. I did say I genuinely think this is better than Slay the Spire or Marvel's Midnight Monty. I know those are video games, but there's not like a lot of board game solo only roguelite deck builders out there. And those weren't empty words. I'm going to prove it to you right now. What does a good solo game need? Scaling challenge, cool progression, and sense of reward. I think the challenge part is a bit wibbly wobbly. Then again, I've got so many difficulty modifiers, I can really ramp this up if I want to. And I will. One day, when I'm less scared. Progression we also hammered out, and it hangs like a nail in a doorknob. I don't know what that means, but I know it's a good thing. But sense of reward, that's where Paperback Adventures grinds the other games into pulp. I'll take it. Consider how a round plays out. You draw some cards and then you form a word with them that strategically delivers the least compromised solution to your current troubles. And then you just execute. Lesser games, yes, I did say that, lesser games will have you formulate a plan, then some crass probability happens, and then, oh, surprise, your plan was stupid because bad dice, haha, or you drew the wrong cards. No, I don't want that, thank you. I want the plan to be the challenge. And it's not like Paperback Adventures doesn't have randomness, it's a deck builder, you draw cards, but the random happens before you're asked to come up with a solution. You can see what your enemy will do infinite turns in advance. So the game keeps the surprises coming and then rewards you for being clever. There you go. No meaningless padding. Every challenge is different and fresh. Paperback Adventures gets the highest recommendation I can give. It's just the best. The best. It is. But I'm gonna need you to do us a favor and at least hit that subscribe button. You watched all the way to the end. There's at least something parasocial happening here. Or is there? I think there is. We also have a podcast called Talk Cardboard where we review more cool board games, and going forward we're going to have guest interviews. Next week we're going to have Jessie Gender on. She'll be talking about all her favourite board games. How about that?